Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Very happy today. I've got Mr. Friso Schutte, who is the CTO at SurePay with me today. He's going to talk a little bit about his company and what's happening in his world. Friso, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Yeah.
Terrific. For our viewers and our listeners, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
I'm Friso Schutte, as you say rightly, the CTO for SurePay. Already about 5 years. So just after SurePay started, I joined SurePay. And what I do is, acting as a CTO, but because the company is not so big, I would say I have a lot of hats on. My background is technical, so I am still the architect, but I also am kind of a product manager. I'm like an IT manager. I lead 5 IT teams in the company. So that's a little bit what I do.
Okay, so you've got your finger in a lot of pies, as we say. Tell us a little bit about how this happened. How did you end up at SurePay? Where were you in the beginning? And how did you get into all of this technical business?
So a long time ago, I studied computer science. So the technical business is something that I learned from my youth, basically. And how I got into SurePay, I was working in the Rabobank as an architect for the online banking environment. So that's on the mobile, but also on the desktop, so for consumers. And while I was working at the Rabobank, which is one of the big banks in the Netherlands, there were some colleagues who had this idea about what turned out to be now SurePay. They thought it would be good to validate or verify the beneficiary against the input when you make a credit transfer. So when you make a credit transfer to somebody else, you type in the name and you type in the IBAN, the account number. And that has never been verified whether the name matches the account holder name. So that was the service that we introduced. And that was an internal project, like a moonshot, in the innovation hub of the Rabobank. And at one point, the idea was to spin out of the Rabobank. That was the moment that I joined. So for me, that was a nice step up. I could lead a whole new team and make the company big or scale the company. That's what we did. So when I joined SurePay, soon thereafter, we moved out of the Rabobank. We got new investors. We really became an independent startup, and now it's more like a scale-up. And we started scaling up, mostly in the UK. So we were busy already in the Netherlands, but then we entered the UK market. So that was my focus there. And it turned out to be quite successful, actually. Yeah.
That's cool. I'd like to get into that and talk a little bit about the steps, but let's start with breaking into the market, coming in, getting your footing. What was that like?
Yeah, so in the Netherlands, of course, we were funded by the Rabobank, so that was kind of an easy start, but to convince the management, that was not so easy. But once the management was convinced, the project started, and there was slight pivoting in the beginning. So it was more meant to be like a contact cloud type of thing, but eventually turned into something that is a fraud prevention system. So if you make a payment to the wrong person, that can result in a misdirected payment, and then the bank needs to return the money, which is a big hassle or potentially a hassle. That can
be. They don't like doing that, do they?
They don't like doing that. Yeah, often the money is also already transferred to other accounts, right? If it's really fraudulent, then it can be difficult to get it back in the first place. But even if you get it back, then banks, of course, are not so happy to help out with these type of things because there's a lot of overhead. So lowering that operational overhead, that was a good business case. At the same time, from the consumer market, we saw that there was a lot of demand in helping out consumers to be sure that you pay to the right person or company. often there's a company involved. So that was the real business case. In order to do that, it was important to have the support of other banks also, not just the Rabobank, because the only organization that knows the account holding information is the bank itself. And so in the Netherlands, we have, for example, ING or ABN AMRO, other banks. And if we want to know what the account holding information is, we have to fetch that from the source, which is the ING or ABN AMRO. You can imagine that they don't want to share that information with the Rabobank. So that's a whole political and an organizational type of thing to accomplish. And that was also one of the reasons why we had to spin out and create our own company. That's what we did. So we made it possible to integrate with ING, ABN AMRO, Rabobank, and then you start with the smaller banks and the long tail. And then in the Netherlands, that became so successful that in the UK, they kind of copied it. But in the UK, they had a little bit of a different way of dealing with it, because rather than having one company working up bottom line, in the Netherlands, we are the single hub in the middle, let's say. We integrate with the banks and we provide the service to the banks. But in the UK, they have an authority called PUK, which acts on behalf of the PSR, the regulator. And they mandated a similar system like ours to the 6 big banks in the beginning, and now actually all the banks in the UK. But they also wanted to promote market competition, so we are not the only vendor there. But yeah, because we had already something live in the Netherlands, it was relatively easy for us to enter the UK market when this whole mandate came into effect. So that was how we entered the UK. And now we are going for the rest of Europe, of course.
And so I can only imagine what it must be like negotiating with banks and trying to get access to this.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah,
sort of. They play their cards very close to the chest, and obviously dealing with money, it's something that a lot of people have a bit of anxiety about. It's a big thing, it's what keeps us going. You must be handling millions of transactions on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Tell us a little bit about how this is possible. What sort of technologies are we using that allow this to take place?
Yeah, so you're right. So we process millions of transactions per day. And we started about 6-7 years ago, fully in the cloud. So that was, we had no legacy, let's say. So we could start from scratch in the cloud. At that point in time, the cloud was still a bit scary for banks. Now it's more common, right? But the technology was already there, the cloud. We just had to convince the banks that it was a good idea to use it. And by having the security and the scalability, both from the beginning in the design, baked into the design, that was the core principles. Yeah, we are able to scale fairly easy horizontally with the cloud infrastructure. AWS we use, Amazon. In the beginning, it was all bare bone with EC2 and so on, and now we move on to more containers and lambdas and etc. But there's a lot of AWS services that we leverage to be able to process all those transactions simultaneously, and also with a very low latency, because we are integrated in the channels of the bank. We want also to give the feedback to a customer or a consumer within milliseconds. So it has to be really fast, and also we have to cope with a lot of transactions at the same time. So yeah, cloud is the magic word, of course. And then leveraging the cloud is, of course, something that we have skilled DevOps engineers and so on for that.
Well, look, for a layman like me, when I first heard about these cloud services and that, I thought, I'm not trusting that. So I can just imagine the scale and the challenge going on there.
But it was very, it sounds logical now, right? But at that time, it was still, you're doing it in the cloud, and will you be storing sensitive data, right? Account holding information, it's considered privacy, personal identifiable information. So it's a bit scary. So we had to do a lot on the security part. We had to give a lot of evidences on all the controls and then the ISO policies and the processes around it. So that was quite a thing. And once you have the big banks on board, then it becomes a little bit easier because smaller banks will say, oh well, if you can do this for the Rabobank, then then you must be compliant with them, but then you must be good enough for us also.
Yeah, you're doing something right. If they're on board with you and they're trusting your service, then it's okay.
Yeah.
No.
This was especially the case in the UK. In the UK, our launching customer was the NetWest Group. So that's our big partner, let's say. And the NetWest Group is very big in the UK, right? It's like 1 out of 4 transactions or something. Is a really insanely amount of transactions that go there. But of course, they also have a very high standard when it comes to onboarding as a vendor and compliancy and rules. So once you have such a big customer, that gave us a lot of possibilities for the other customers.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, handling this sort of stuff, handling money, handling these volumes, working with these big names, you've got to stay on top of your game.
Yeah.
The whole time. You can't afford to slack, to miss information, to fall behind. And we know how quick this world, your world, this IT world is changing. How do you stay on track? How do you make sure that you're on the ball all the time?
Yeah, no, that's the challenge. Yeah, and becoming one of the players is one thing, and then staying ahead of the rest is really difficult and challenging. Yeah, my tactic is not. I don't have a magic thing or so, but I try to hire, of course, very skilled people. So we pay a lot of attention to the hiring process. We work with a software partner in the beginning, but I think the quality of the software is super important. So I pay a lot of attention to that, rather than just getting the cheapest developer or something like that. To motivate the engineering group, we also work hard to keep using modern technology. We don't want to fall into the trap where you have a lot of legacy or old systems that nobody wants to work on. So stay on top of that. And then, of course, on the business side, I try to add new features. We launched a portal. We have all these type of things that a company does, right? You want to, it's a niche, of course, verifying the name against the account holding information, but you can add features on top of it. We also serve as corporate for the KYC process. We have a really nice dashboard on top of it. So all those things are important. Of course, we hope that we never get a data breach, but that's the number one thing, because it can go fast, as you say. You can go up fast, but you can also go down fast if you make mistakes.
So a lot of pressure there. And you told us in the beginning that you're playing a part in multiple roles in the company at the moment. Tell me about what's in store for you moving forward now. What sort of things are you going to put in place without giving away any secrets? What sort of things are you putting in place to give yourself a more sort of focused direction?
Yeah, so we didn't scale super hard in the last year. So the focus was more on operational efficiency, let's say. So make it lean and mean so that we can scale later on when it's needed. And it's going to be needed because in Europe, there's this new regulation that mandates all the banks in Europe to have a system similar to ours. So the IBAN name verification, in Europe we call it verification of payee, the VOP. That is mandated now by European law for all the banks within about 2 years. So we will need to scale across Europe, and that's no secret because everybody knows that this this regulation is there. But that also means that we have to be prepared as good as possible to be able to scale, and that's something that we have really focused on. And once we scale, for me personally, I would love to hire, also architects and engineering managers, etc. But until then, we have a very flat organization. I have multiple roles, but that works out fine because we have relatively autonomous teams with a principal or lead engineers in each team and a product owner in each team. And only if you scale beyond that, I think there's a need for extra architects or specialists of some sort. So for me, I see that that will be the future, where we have a bigger leadership team, let's say.
Terrific. And let's move on to something a bit more light-hearted or a little bit easier. As a teacher, is this something that you always knew you wanted to do with your life? Is this something that, you did mention that you started working with computers early on? What was your direction? How did that, tell us about your path?
Well, that's interesting, actually. Yeah. So I followed a little bit classical approach in that sense. I always liked creating stuff. So developing, coding, programming. When I was young, I had, these computers at home. I would make my own games, etc. So that was something that I really like. I still like to create stuff, but when you become older, you automatically get more responsibility, or well, at least for me that happens. I like to get more responsibility so you can make more impact, because when you are a single contributor, you cannot make a whole video game or a whole banking application with one person, right? So I am more valuable if I can guide the whole team. So I moved into architecture. That was a logical choice for me. I also played the role of project lead, project manager, business analyst, consultant, all these type of roles I played in my career, and ended up as a CTO. It's a little bit of coincidence. It's not something that I was really looking for. On the other hand, no, my dream was more to create my own company. It was a little, so I'm almost there. It's almost a little bit my baby here. Yeah, and the CTO fits me because it's still feeling with the technical. It's not just management. It's also a bit of the content. I would not be a good line manager if I would only do line management. Let's say that's not my. I do have, of course, direct reports and then the one-on-ones and mid-year reviews, etc. But I think my strength is more on the content, on the architecture, and creating new stuff. And for example, now we have these things like AI. Everybody talks about AI, but how are we going to use or leverage AI in the future? That's the kind of stuff I would like to talk about. And as a CTO, I have a strong say in that. So CTO is a good job. I can recommend it to everybody.
Brought that up. That is very interesting. AI is crazy. Again, for a layman like me, figuring out what's going on. I see all these things. I see them on my feeds and whatever, and these computers talking to each other.
It's hard to avoid it.
What they're doing. It's insane. Yeah. Is this something that, obviously I hear AI is going to do to the cloud what the cloud did to the internet? They're talking about this natural progression stuff. Is this something you guys are, you must be seriously looking into it.
Absolutely. I believe that that the AI will really change any company, right? So rather than fighting against it or resisting, we just need to know how to best use it. That's the way to deal with it. And for me, that starts always with baby steps, and then just getting a feeling for it, talking to other people in the industry, and going to conferences, see what's possible. There's a lot of technology push. All our vendors, AWS, but we also use things like Elastic or Google Apogee or those tools. They all have a strategy for AI, so they will push it. And for me, that starts with absorbing all this information, and then we can make our own path. But it's super important to to do something with it. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how this actually goes.
And for us, it's very logical. It's something that we wanted to do for a long time. We process millions of transactions, and we have a big database with all this data. We need to do something with it, right? That there's a lot of information flowing through our system, so that makes it an obvious candidate for something with AI. Not necessarily generative AI. It's broader than that. It can also be anomaly detection, these type of things. But yeah, the new hype is of course a generative AI. That's we will also use that in one way or another. You know.
So Frieza, just before we go, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything you'd like to tell our viewers and our listeners about your journey, something we missed, maybe a word of advice, you can give that to us. And
No, not really. We talked about several topics already, right? Yeah.
you're very chilled. You've got a very cool, like relaxed
Oh, thank
vibe.
you. Yeah.
Is there a secret to that?
Well, it's funny that you say this because we just had recently also some, let's say, more heated discussions within the company. So I'm not always that chill or relaxed. It's but I think it's yeah, it's of course it's a person's character to a certain extent, but I also try to stay professional. I think it's good to not be too emotional with your at the same time you have to be inspirational for your own team, certainly as a manager, but in general I think that's good. So it's finding the right balance between staying professional and so sticking to your own character. I think that's also good.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much from myself and on behalf of the team. Thank you for your time. And, we will be keeping our eye on you and following your journey.
Yeah, I will do that. I think there will be some interesting stuff coming up. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you also. Yeah, thanks for having me and inviting me.